Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast here at the Culture Wave Media Network, and we are here to discuss what is currently the biggest show across every country in the world that has Netflix. It is Squid Game Season 2, or Squid Game 2, if you want to call it that. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian. Joining me this week, making his debut on the channel, Sean Villa. Sean, welcome.
Oh my goodness. I'm honored to be here, everybody. Hello.
Love having you here, as well as Mikey Peniston, a familiar face.
Hello, everybody.
And this is one that, so when Sean joined Culture Wave about maybe a little over a month ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We were discussing shows. And I was like, I don't know if you want to cover certain things on the channel. Like, what are you interested in? He goes, well, I'd love to do Squid Game. And I'm like, well, I would love to do Squid Game with you. I was really excited for the show coming back. It's probably, based on statistic, the biggest show in the history of television.
Wow.
Based on the amount of viewers that it's gotten, the amount of attention that it's gotten. I mean, it's Netflix's most popular show ever. I think it has like season 1, at least.
So, well, I'll say I remember when the first season came out that what I thought was so fascinating about Squid Game was that it was a foreign television show that was huge in America, which I feel like is already kind of a rare thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also weird. It is a weird show, like for the, I don't know what you want to call them, like the generic normal TV audience, right? It came out and it was it made you have to get somewhat involved or aware of like Korean social politics.
Mm-hmm.
And also there was a lot of violence and murder.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a pretty unanimous hit everywhere, as you were just saying. And, I think that was like hopeful, when to see that, because I feel like a lot of the time you get a lot of like the same generic slop, and then Squid Game came out, had something like interesting and was doing something new, and people were like, yeah, more of that, please. And it maintained its relevance for these past 3 years as we've waited for season 2.
100%.
And now that it's here.
I was going to say the biggest thing for me when I first heard of Squid Game, because it was the number one show, like you said, not only in America, but it was like everywhere. It was a phenomenon. Yeah. The biggest thing for me was, and what they sold the show on in terms of marketing the show, was the novelty of violence.
Right.
And that's not necessarily completely what the show is, what makes the show as great as it is. It's a nice novelty item to the show in terms of you're having this life or death scenario. It's it feels like a bigger, more grandiose episode of like Black Mirror. And I know they've done so. I think one of their episodes they do something like this where they like are having viewers watch people placed in like a war zone essentially, and like watching them die. Right. That was where I was like skeptical in the beginning before watching season 1. I loved season 1, obviously. It turns Lee Jung-jae into a star. He eventually gets to do Star Wars and other things in America. But it was an anticipated follow-up. And I know that when it was first announced they were going to make a sequel, the creator of the show was like, I don't know necessarily if I want to make a sequel. I don't know how I'm going to do a season 2. This was intended to be a complete story. This is where it was going to end up. And now we got this season and we're getting season 3 in 6 months. Which can go into the spoilers later, what we think about all that, obviously.
Right. But
overall, it was a show, like you said, we've been waiting on for years. Mikey, for you, with what we're talking about is the obvious, the anticipation, right? And what came with the first season of Squid Game. How did you feel when Squid Game was like at the height of its popularity when it first came out? And were you similar to us being like, I don't know how this is going to go, but it's interesting that a North Korean show is the most talked about thing in America for the year. South Korean. Yes, Mikey.
I remember when it came out, I understood the hype, just because I was slowly kind of getting into. I just feel like foreign film was slowly kind of getting a little bit more of an appreciation, especially in the States at that point. And so I feel like that for sure this is the one that really like did it as far as television. And I know myself going into it, it was still a little bit new of a thing for me. And so I just knew it was like you guys said, it was like so popular. And so I remember when I first watched it, I understood why. Not only that, I feel like the thing that they do with season 1 and just with this show that's so important, and it shows it's almost like a social experiment of how people could really get when underneath like this in sort of circumstance. And they just were able to do it so well with those characters in season 1. I feel like that's what really hooked so many people too. And I know the reason why I think that is because since then that relevance has continued in now a Netflix spinoff of like having real people come in. Like Mr. Beast is doing his own version. Like there's so many versions of this now in terms of just seeing the social experiment of it all, that I feel like that alone just like is what resonated so well. But now to add that on top of a South Korean just like I don't know, just like the topics of everything that comes with it, like you said, like having to learn the politics of it all and everything to it. I don't know, it was something new that I think we all needed to. And so I didn't know how to go into it, but I'm happy I did. Going into this new season, I didn't really know where, because obviously season 1 ended on a place where they obviously could have continued it. I didn't know where it could have gone with it. So I think that anticipation grew a little bit more just because of like, what could they do with this? Again, also, it stayed relevant. Like, I feel like it had its height, but it always kept its height because of so many different spin-offs and stuff like that. So I guess for me, it was just like, what are we really getting into at this point? That curiosity of where could we go from here? Because I genuinely didn't know where.
Yeah, the cultural relevance for me also kind of highlights the importance, and I shit on it a fair share, but like the relevance of Netflix for a show like this. Because like when you were talking about how like it kind of took people, but like it reminds me of like the rise of Stranger Things in a way, where Stranger Things, I don't think Stranger Things would have been as successful if that show is on like Showtime, or if that show is on even a cable network. Like Netflix made it so much bigger than it was. Bridgerton, a similar thing. Not every show on Netflix can get to that point, but Squid Game had that times 100. And it was a South Korean show in a foreign language where people were watching it. And I think you had asked right before we started recording, how did you guys watch the show? Like, that becomes a question amongst friends. Like, did you watch it with subtitles? Did you watch it as the dub? Like, so it's an interesting cultural conversation. Also a conversation about where we are in the industry and the importance of streaming for things like this. And I think after this show came out, dude, like international programming on streaming, like ballooned. Like there were streaming services that were paying different countries like their own fees essentially to be like, go make your own original content. And people come like in flocks to watch certain things. Obviously, nothing has reached the level of Squid Games, but I think it's just so interesting to see how where they started from Squid Game. I don't think they thought it would be obviously as big as it's become, and now where they're at. You know what I mean?
And now they've got a custom Netflix intro for their show. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm not like huge on too many Netflix originals, but like when you boot up an episode of Squid Game season 2, it's like their own custom, like the little N for Netflix comes up. They're on the stairs or whatever. So like Netflix has really taken it like as the victorious stride into new territory that it is. I also think, Mikey, I think you brought it up earlier. What's so fascinating about Squid Games, like as a product now, I guess you could say, is that I like that the show in this second season is sort of acknowledging or playing with the reception of the first season. Because I think in America, I'm not so sure about in other countries, but I know that in America, what was really like the most culturally relevant thing about the first season of Squid Games was the games. And now you have things like, like the Beast Games, which has just come out, which is sort of emblematic of Squid Games. You have, I think Netflix did a reality show of Squid Games. Yeah, so what they took from the relevance of the show and the success of the show was like the idea of these people competing in these games. And what they removed from it was really the thesis of the show, or the questions that the show is posing about, the socioeconomic climate of Korea, but also, like how far are people willing to go for money? Like, how does a capitalist society function properly? And, what would you do to each other for your own success? There's all like these deep questions. And I feel like that's what's so interesting about season 2 is that we are simultaneously kind of exploring like the popcorn television of these games by introducing, I want to say 3 new Squid Games in this new season that are completely different from the ones that we saw in season 1. But also, never being unserious. Like, it peppers us with fun. It allows us to kind of like watch it and point and go like, oh my gosh, like, that poor guy just got shot in the head.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, the next scene will be about like, oh my God, like would I stay to try to do, like, if I was in this situation where like, I think there's a character who's like, daughter is dying of cancer. And he's got to stay because if he can win one more game, then he might have enough money to pay for the treatment. I think like to balance those two tones and never feel intrusive or feel like one is ruining the effectiveness of the other is the biggest strength of this season, for sure, for me.
I would agree with that. I also think one of the things that makes this season interesting in comparison to the first one in a more simple way is that it pays a lot more attention to individual characters in a deeper way this season. Yeah. It definitely leaves you like, it's crazy to even say this, and like, because again, it's the game show mentality, but you walk away and you're like, I like that character, like they're fun, like I'm rooting for them,
right? Like
instead of just Gi-hun, who's like the character that we know from obviously the whole entire journey that we see him go on in season 1, but then you have all these other characters and you're seeing the way that they're relating to one another. There's a lot more group mentality and partnerships that are formed throughout it. It becomes political in its own sense throughout it. And I love how you brought up the thing about how the choices of the socioeconomic and would you put yourself in that situation, they break it down to even smaller of a sense in the very beginning. I don't know if it's episode 1 or 2, but Gong Yu's character, the salesman, that goes around and hands out the cards to everybody, right? He gets bread and he gets lottery tickets. I love this sequence.
Yeah, me too.
And he goes to every homeless person and gives them the choice. Do you want a lottery ticket or do you want a piece of bread? Are you starving? Or do you just think that you want money to do whatever you want? And every single character every single homeless person except for one picks the lottery tickets, and all of them lose. And then he throws all the bread on the floor and is stomping on it just to make up, like, and he yells. I think he says, "You guys made this choice. Like, this isn't me. Like, you guys could have easily wiped me clean of all of these pieces of bread. Your bellies would be full. You maybe would have a better mentality about your day because you're thinking straight, because you have food in your stomach. But instead, you're choosing the route of selfishness and the route of luxury." Right. And I think that's so interesting, Sean, like you brought up, like the balance of tones in this series throughout 2 seasons now is such a hard tightrope to walk because there's an aspect of it that you watch as a viewer where you're like, this is so fucked up. Like, I can't believe that this is happening. But then, like, you brought up the example of the guy with the sick child. Then you have like an example of a pregnant woman who, at the time of when she enters the games, she has no partner. So she's like, how am I going to make money for my child? How am I going to be able to survive? They just told me this is a way that I can make money, and this is a way that I can sort of follow through with this and go on with it. How do you feel about the whole socioeconomic part of it, Mikey, and like the morality with these characters going forward, especially in this season?
Especially with this season, well, that was always the portion of it that got me, is to see how far these characters could really go underneath that sort of pressure, and their own sort of pressures, and like also just learning each of the characters. And so, as far as this season, I feel like they upped it for sure. I feel like those states, like you said, like bringing in a pregnant woman alone is like wild, right? Like, I feel like that's crazy. So like you said, it's more personal this go around. Last season, I feel like it was a lot more focused. Like, you had like your few people that like it came with a bit of a heartfelt story, but a lot of these people were just people in debt that were like also like.
A lot of them were crazy, like low life scumbags.
Exactly.
Or at least they were basically, for the lack of a better term, they are broadcasted to the audience as these people don't really have much to live for, and all they have done is gambled away money, and now they're in debt to people and they're in debt to society.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? When I was watching this season, and I didn't feel this or I don't remember feeling this as much in the first season, but there was a certain point where I was watching it and the show felt like it was creating a conversation of, well, if it is these contestants' choice to remain here, which seems like it's a big part of this season, is that they're consistently choosing to remain in the games, then like, is it really morally wrong if it's like what the majority decides, right? And then I was watching it and I thought to myself, like, you know, Ji-hun's struggle throughout the whole season is he wants to destroy the games and he doesn't think that they're right. But then I was thinking, you know, like, maybe like, are we the bad guy? Like,
As a viewer?
as the viewer, as the audience, are we in the wrong for just going like, oh, I wonder what game they're gonna play next? Like, oh, I wonder if the guy with the sick child's gonna make it through. Like, I feel like it almost positions the audience through like the expert tone to kind of like you as a viewer tend to be like the rich people in the gold mask from the first season more than you are any of these people, because you're the one that's sitting there on your couch watching these people suffer and going like, nice, this is great, and I like that the show is making me think that while I can also have fun with it. It's exploring like how fucked up it is that everybody just like loves to see like suffering basically, but it's also saying that like there is something to that, because we have the frontman character who is a huge part of this
because
season. He enters the games in this second season, and I feel like I'm having the same thought process that he's having, where he's thrown himself into this situation to basically prove to himself, like, is this justifiable? Like, are these people choosing to do this, and therefore it's like fine, like this is what the group has decided. And I almost feel like his motivation, which we don't know for sure because season kind of gets cut at a strange point in his arc, where he's thinking to himself, like, I think he's testing his own philosophy. Like, I think the philosophy that's kind of mirrored by the what's the guy, the recruiter in the first episode,
the salesman,
this like salesman character who's crushing the bread and making you use the lottery tickets, and everyone's choosing the lottery tickets. Like, I think the thesis of the antagonists in this season is to say like you like the games, and that's talking to like both us and the people participating. It's like, you want this, you're all voting for this, you like it, like the suffering is like worth it for the good of the few, right? And I feel like that's sort of where the season concludes, is like on that note, is like, did Ji-hun and the did he succumb to that ideal? Like, did he sacrifice other people to get what he thought was best? And is that
to end the games?
End the games. Like, did he, like, I just think it's very complicated. I have a lot to say. I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that it's creating a great space for conversation about the point of the show without making it miserable and like losing that charm of the first season of just like, whoa, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, I want to watch real people do this, No,
I know. Like, I think the other thing too is that with the salesman character and the frontman, like, they're also putting themselves in situations where I don't want to say they're having fun, because I don't know if that's really the right way of putting it, but they're willing to play these games. Like, how many times does the salesman, that scene with him and Ji-hun early on in I don't know if it's episode 1 or episode 2, but when they're playing Russian roulette, it's a crazy scene because he's just so weirdly exuberant and excited to give himself something where he feels like he's losing, like he could lose. There's a possibility that he could lose. And the frontman, like you brought up, Sean, I think he's putting himself in a scenario where, and I watched this season with my brother. I watched season 1 with my brother, and like every game, as soon as the game starts, my brother turns to me, he's like, is this dude gonna die? Like, does he realize the situation he's putting himself in? Like, it doesn't matter if he's trying to get himself closer to Ji-hun. Like, he could die. He could easily just die. And you're almost, as an audience member, rooting for that, because on one hand, he is the reason that these games exist, and you're like Ji-hun and you want to see them end because you're rooting for him to be the hero.
Right.
And they play on the trope of the hero so much throughout this season because it's kind of this adversarial thing between Ji-hun and the frontman. So I'm really intrigued to see where they go with his character, because I thought I knew where they were going, and now I feel like I'm completely thrown off.
Yeah, I really don't know either. And you know what? I'm very drawn. So I'm a screenwriter. I should have mentioned at the start of this, but I'm really drawn myself to characters that sort of embody a philosophy. And I feel like that's what a lot of the people that run the games are in this show, as they like are this philosophy of like, I don't know, like this weird twisted version of like fairness, of like, if we present you with like a horrible opportunity, like, but it's your choice to do it, like, would you do it? And I feel like they all sort of embody the like that's like justifiable. And then Ji-hun is the opposite of that, and he comes in and says that like you're basically just like manipulating people to do this because you're playing off of their suffering. while we're talking about that first episode, I think for me, just to, get back on track of just like talking about the show and not the themes and, huge moral questions of the show, I think that first episode might be a highlight for me of the show. I think the recruiter and everything going on with him and our reintroduction to June and where he is, and, this whole like mob that he's like committed to everything. I think it's
that he used to owe money to.
Right, that he used to owe money to. It's like a crazy callback that like I barely even remembered from the first season. Like it speaks to me as someone that like knows the world, like knows how to sort of evolve the show into a cool way. And I think like at the end of the day, it's just like awesome. Like, say what you want about it. Like I think it's just like really cool. Of Ji-yoon is cool in this season.
Yeah.
Like he's got, he has a fucking armory and he rents out a whole motel and he's got money on the bed. Like I'm watching that, I'm just like, this dude rocks.
Yeah.
Like this is awesome.
Did you, Mikey, for you with the lead in to not throwing us right into the games, because I don't think we get to the first game until
It's episode 3.
it's episode 3, and it's not even in the beginning of episode 3, right? It's like
Yeah, you gotta wait a little bit.
you got to wait till like midway through the episode. Did you enjoy that we get a little bit more exposition in terms of the characters and where we end up by the end of season 1 instead of just throwing us into the games, whether it's the end of episode 1 or at the start of the whole season? How did you feel about the way that they kind of opened season 2?
At first, I didn't like it, if I'm going to be honest. At first, I thought it was a little slow. I fell victim to the crowd of people that were like, just bring us to the games. Like I want to see the games. But then, like, once we finally got to the games, I realized how crucial all of that exposition really was. And even looking back on it, I was a really big fan. Like, I agree. I think episode 1 for me was also just like a highlight, being able to see the recruiter in that state. I feel like it set the tone for not only everybody that's obviously affected by these games, but it set the tone that the people that are also actively like running these games and doing these games are also affected and crazy to a little bit of a stake, which is why I really liked the fact that this season we are seeing like the other side, like the mask people, just because again it's like, oh wow, okay, like you realize that like in one way or another people are being held to this, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? It's like, I don't know, it just brings another stake into it all. And so I really did appreciate that whole exposition building up. Again, I didn't
It
at
takes
first,
its time.
but it did,
takes its time to get to where some viewers are waiting to get to. The interesting thing is, and this is not a moral a compass of success or anything, but looking at the IMDb scores episode by episode, the top rated episode of the season is the premiere.
Great.
The lowest rated episode is the finale.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes sense to me too. And we actually start to see it. It's interesting because episode 1 is a 7.9, episode 2 is a 7.3, which is the second lowest. Then episode 3, you got a 7.8, 7.6, 7.3, 7.7, and then a 6.8. So it kind of staggers as we go through the season. But jumping to the end quickly, and then we'll go in a lot of the in between. You've already alluded to it, Sean. It makes sense why the finale of the season is the lowest rated, because they leave us in a place that doesn't feel satisfactory to where we were led to.
Yeah.
We end on a legitimate cliffhanger, which then I believe it was the next day they announced, or a couple days after the show came out, they announced season 3 is coming in 6 months.
Right. Everybody relax.
Yeah.
It's coming out.
And it's a very, like, I was talking off camera before we started recording with our buddy Mark, who does a podcast too, about how with this season, I said it was upsetting because it was like, this was such a Netflix thing to do, was to say, hey, we're going to do 7 episodes this season and we're going to cut you here. We're going to give you more leeway and you can have more runway to do what you want to do and tell your full story over more than maybe 7 or 10 episodes, because I don't know how many episodes season 3 will be. But we want you to cut it into 2 parts because then we can elongate the success of the show, which I think is actually, it kind of hurts it because, as you guys brought up in the beginning of the episode, like, this show has stood the test of time since 2021 already.
Yeah.
We don't need a 2-part thing with this show to get across where we want to get to. So talk to me about how you felt about that final episode. There's a lot that happens in it, and then where we end up by the end of it, Sean, and then Mikey will jump to you.
Yeah. So I think that there are, there's a growing problem that I've been seeing with mid-season finales. I think The Walking Dead was kind of the show that pioneered that, which
Probably.
is basically where you get like 8 episodes into a 16 episode season, and then you say, oh, you got to wait, 3 months until the rest of it comes back. And it's really unsatisfying almost always when they do that, because I think the problem with it is that when a typical season ends, a good season finale is not a conclusion to the show, but a conclusion of an arc or of a phase of the main character or the supporting characters, whether that be a location or, I always go back to one of the best written shows of all time, Breaking Bad, where if you, without spoiling too much, if you take a season finale of any season of Breaking Bad, you'll hit some point where it's the conclusion of the storyline that's been occurring for most of that season, whether it be a villain or, the descent into evil of the main character or what have you, right? So I think in some way it's got to be a conclusion to something. And when I look at the season 2 finale of Squid Game, it rings much more of a mid-season finale than it does of like a true season finale, because what really concludes, aside from, I guess you could say, the frontman's arc, I think like that could be argued to be like the driving force of the season of like, this battle between Gi-hun and the frontman. But aside from that, we have about, I don't know, like 20 characters that we're jumping back and forth to, and we have a whole other plot with the detective and this boat captain and this like twist at the end with the boat captain that has no conclusion at all and barely feels like it started up in the first place.
Yeah.
So I understand like, budget reasons and, like to get people on the edge of their seats, like, oh, I really want this to come back. Like, I understand it from a marketing perspective. But I think that from a writing perspective, it's hard. It's really difficult to look at that and be satisfied because it's not meant to be satisfying, because it's not done. You haven't concluded anything. So it really just feels like, oh, we got halfway through this season that's supposed to have 7 more episodes, and now, like, where are they? Like, what the hell, man? I'm going to forget because you didn't conclude. Like, it's not a stopping point. Season 1 is a stopping point. Like, the show obviously could have kept going, but if it took 8 years to get there, I'd still be like, that on its own is a satisfying story that kind of comes to a close and leaves enough doors open for more. This is not that. This is every door is still open. And, that's frustrating as a viewer. So I get why people are upset.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, Mikey.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said. You hit it
Thanks,
on the nail
guys.
for sure. It's just such a Netflix ploy at this point for like this whole mid-season thing. They're really so good of just breaking up these things. I don't get it why. It feels so unfinished. I remember the moment it ended, even like literally the last beat. I was like I think it just like cuts to like a shot of Ji-hun, I'm sorry guys, Ji-hun, his face, and like that was literally all we got. And I was like, it just didn't even feel like the right sort of moment to end. Like I feel like that scene on, like they could have at least concluded, I don't know, the scene, if anything. I don't know. It felt really, really weird. I for sure wasn't a fan of it. I know that what was I gonna say? Just as far as like I know that at the end I felt like I wanted another episode or two, like we could for this part at least. And so looking at like I guess that viewpoint of it, then like maybe if like say they wanted to get away with doing another like 7 episodes, because it was a weird 7 is kind of a weird,
it is a strange number,
right?
Yeah.
And so like maybe they didn't have too much to fill with like the back end.
Yeah, maybe
of this.
season 3 is gonna be like 4 episodes.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah, right.
I know, but they like Stranger Things isn't. I don't mean to keep going back to it, but remember they did with Stranger Things last season too.
Yeah, they
and
did
it was
another
different.
mid-season nonsense.
They did, but then when I don't agree with that either. But when they came back sooner, and they had 3 episodes,
Yes.
but they were all like an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they were basically mini movies,
Right.
is what they were. I don't know if Squid Game is going to do the same thing. They definitely could if they wanted.
I could 100% see them doing that. Just because I don't know, it just feels like maybe they don't have that much left to tell to the story, and so I feel like it will be a gimmick like that. I don't know right now if I'm necessarily too upset with that, just because it could be interesting. But I know that I'm definitely not happy with how it ended.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less upset because it's coming in 6 months, and I think that again, like I feel like that's more of like something you do with a mid-season finale.
Yeah.
Which is why I think like it's frustrating, but at the same time, like all right, 6 months, Like, it'll be back. I'll remember everything.
Yeah.
It's not like that terrible.
Mm.
If it was like 3 years, which is typical for this season of this show so far, that's its track record, that would be unacceptable, I feel like. Because I think it functions more as a manipulative ending than it is like a true ending. Right?
Mhm.
It's an ending that's supposed to make you go, oh God, I want to see more. Not because of the quality of what's just been presented, but because of the dissatisfaction of not getting an ending.
Yeah.
You're going like, well, I've invested all this time, like, let's finish this. More so than like, wow, that was great. Like, if this comes back, like, I gotta watch more
Well,
of that.
that what you were just talking about is exactly why like them ending the show, and we'll get to scores obviously later, but them ending the show the way that they did this season brings it down like a whole point for me.
Yeah, think
because
that's
I
fair.
felt like the whole entire finale leading up to that moment was great. Everything was paced well. I love the whole militia scene. We could talk about that. And like, just I think what they did, you talked about the shock, right? Or I don't know which one it was. I apologize. Whoever gets the credit, you both get the credit. We're talking about the shock of the first season and how the real shock was the games. You were seeing these things play out. And especially for American audiences, like, we don't know these Korean games. Like, we're seeing them being played out for the first time. You know what I mean? And then seeing them have deadly consequences. This season, the shock is more so putting you in a situation in which our main character, who we just rooted for a whole season, is willingly putting himself back into the situation that he had a 1 in 456 chance of winning. Like, that, where he could literally lose his life. And I think that when you start to then, when you end this season on something where it's like, we're going to kill off some characters that you care about, that you've learned to care about, including Ji-hoon's like best friend, essentially, or his only friend that he had coming into the game when he put himself back in there. And then you find out that his only other friend that he develops over time is literally the guy he's been fighting to kill, a whole uprising. To end it there, where you don't have answers to those questions, and the stuff with the detective that, I don't know, I kind of saw the captain thing coming. I don't know if it was because of, but to get it in the last episode and then have no follow-up to it, to now leave that as a threat over here, is annoying, because it's like, there's nothing satisfactory about that. When you used to watch shows on cable, or with something like The Sopranos, right? Breaking Bad is another great example. Like, you would have, like, it was the perfect way you explained it, Sean. It was the ending to an arc. You were ending something with a character, with a story arc that was a layer in this overall storybook that you're trying to tell over 6 seasons. And this is only season 2. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, and this is no offense to the creator, because I really feel like it was a Netflix decision. But it's so much with that shit where it's like, guys, we used to have television shows that were like 10 seasons long. You know what I mean? That had like all these different stories and all these different ways that you can rely on character and rely on all these things. So I felt so cheated by the end of this season, because I was like, why are you going to, like, why? Like, why are you going to end it right there?
Right. But you know what? You could see it coming, though, because I think if you're watching it and you have like an understanding of pacing, then when you get to everything with Ji-hoon and the games is good. It's well paced. I think it's the best part of the show by a long shot, and I think it's really entertaining. But when we're cutting back to the captain and this hit team that's looking for him, if you just looked at that plot and basically considered it the B plot of the season, which it really is, it has next to no content. It is just them.
You're
looking.
100% right.
They're just looking around.
There's more content with the formation of the team and that whole thing before Ji-hoon gets to the games, where they have the, again, it's like, what does he call it? He calls it plan A. It's literally plan A to try and get to whoever the front man is. But as soon as plan B goes into effect, it's almost like, as an audience, you don't even give a shit about those characters, because you're not even seeing them enough.
Well, it's because nothing's happening. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, like, as cool as a setup as it is, it's one of those things where you can tell, like, we need all this stuff to happen at the games first. And like, man, I wish we could just like teleport to like when these guys are going to be relevant, because they have to be there. The seeds have to be planted. And if we never cut to them, we're going to be like, what the hell? But I think there is an episode in there where we never see them. And the reason that is because like they're not at the point in the story where they have to fulfill the role, and they failed to give them something interesting to do in the meantime. You know, a lot of it is just like, let's check this island. Well, they're not on this island. Let's check this island. Oh, somebody blew up, but they're not on this island. You know, it's like, it immediately gets tiring, because it's like, well, we know that eventually, you know, God willing, they're going to find the Squid Games, you know, and then it'll be like, it'll have payoff. But when you're at episode 6 and they're nowhere near these islands, it's like, well, it looks like this is going to be a long wait for this. And now, they introduced this threat of the captain way too late. Now I'm thinking, like, now that we're talking about it, if they had introduced that the captain was a spy in like episode 3, now there's intrigue in those scenes. Now it's like, oh my god, like this guy's like, he's messing with them, he's cutting wires and sabotaging their drones, and like then you have like a little like side mystery because now you have like a almost like an invader plot of like someone who's like a spy in your little group in both things, and it's like a parallel of that. And that could have added some real like intrigue and tension to these scenes because right now there's no tension in them. They're just on a boat.
Well, it's when they have that conversation. Like the most intriguing thing with that B plot to me was when, but it comes at too late of a time where Woo Suk, the character that is playing the rock paper scissors with the mob boss,
right.
He comes in and he has that conversation with the boat captain, and he plays the aloof idiot throughout the season, and you see that sort of happening. But that gets introduced at such a late time where then as a viewer you're like, oh, he's saying too much. Like he's saying too much to, and he even goes, I know I probably shouldn't be saying this to you, but like who are you gonna tell?
Right.
And the guy's like, I don't know anything. Like, and it's like, all right, and obviously it's more of like a cliche thing, but the point is that it's introduced at such a late period that it almost is inconsequential to where we're gonna end up by the end of this season,
right.
Because
it doesn't conclude.
Yeah,
it's
it's so frustrating, man. I hate that television has gone in that direction.
Yeah,
it's really annoying. But all right, so let's talk about quickly the new games that we get introduced to and some of those scenes, right? This is the fun. Let's talk about the games. Fun. People just dying everywhere.
This is the popcorn TV aspect of Squid Games. It is the version that the American audience is like, yes. Like even my sister watching the show is like, are we gonna get to the games at some point? I'm like, just revel in what we have. This is good. Like you're at a good episode, but whatever. When we do get to the games, I think they're really fun. I think they're just as fun as the first season. I don't know if I have no idea what the public opinion on the games is because I bet a lot of people are watching it like, oh, I wonder how Mr. Beast is going to do this. I'm not. I think in the context of the show that they're really fun and really thrilling to watch. The first one, not red light, green light, but this like second game that they start playing.
Is that their relay race?
Where they're going in the circle. Yep, yes. The relay race. That is awesome because it's 5 games in one.
Crazy.
Yeah, and like every one of the games is interesting. And it's like most of them I've never heard of. I mean, one of them's just throwing a rock, which like, we've been there. Yeah. But there's other ones where it's like they have these little like colored cubes or whatever.
Yeah,
and they have to, like flick them up, and like the cinematography on it's really cool where they're like throwing it up at the lens. They play like this really like fun music, and there's like long takes in the whole sequence. It's just like a great sequence.
Having it was cool. It's the first time you see throughout Squid Game that you see like the audience factor in the game.
Right.
Like all the contestants cheering for one another. Like, yeah, you got it. Like it was so fun to see that. The spinning top was also nuts for me in that sequence. I thought that scene was crazy. And what I love, a little thing in this season that I loved, is when Gi-hun is telling everybody what he thinks the game is going to be, coming off of the first season, which you obviously, if you're at least a little bit intelligent, you should be able to indicate like there's no way they're going to do the exact same thing again. But I love the dream sequence when he picks the triangle, and it's like the crazy complex triangle.
There's like 16,000 triangles,
and they're like, "You said it was the easiest one." I love that scene. I thought that was great, and you brought it up, I think, earlier, Sean. One thing about this season that I also liked more about season than this rather than season 1 is this season has so much more personality to it. And I think the creator said it, like, there's so much more humor in this season than the first season. Like, so much more humor. Like, there were moments where I was laughing out loud, and we're talking about a show where literally characters are dying left and right.
Right.
So I love, and that sequence is definitely another good example of that with the relay race. What about that episode stood out to you in that game in particular, Mikey?
For me, it was the audience reaction to it all. I feel like one thing that I really appreciated with this group is that like you said, like we said before, like the season 1's group was like they were like at each other's nets majority of the time, and like they were like, you would have thought that they were all assassins outside of the games because like they just wanted to kill. Like these people, like obviously like they have that instinct in their head, and like they are doing that same thing, but you see a little bit more humanity with these people. And like it almost, when we first were introduced to this group, it was almost like it was like a satire to the games, if I'm going to be honest, because they were so like, it felt like like, oh, what if we take a bunch of millennials and we put them in like Squid Games? That's what it felt like. And like I appreciated that to a degree, because now you had like season 1, you had Jae-hoon, where like he was like also just like in a place of like, I don't know, like the scene where he smiles during like the photo is so symbolic of like where he stood in that season. And then like now to know that he's like the serious one and like the midst of like a bunch of like kids to a degree. I really like that. I really loved the relay race though. That episode was just, even like Squid Games is so good for like even like a beat where it's like they had the moment of win in the end, and then like you cut to like the other people and they're like they're shooting them and they're dead. Like something so quick like that where it's like, all right, like we could have fun, but like yeah, we're still like watching a bunch of people fight for their lives. And so I really appreciated that. I really appreciated all the games. This to the point as far as the dream sequence. I thought it was so smart of them to like every promo that I saw included that as if that was like what he was actually going to be playing. And so I first I was like, oh man, like we're not going to actually get that moment, but I liked that because it showed also a level of like fear for him as far as being back in the games, but also like you said, like quickly on in that red light green light game, he became like sort of like the voice of like, oh, I've been here, I know what we're doing, like listen to me. So like there's a lot of pressure that comes in even just that. And so I don't know, I felt like that it added a stake. But the games I appreciate.
That was fun though too, how they gave that to Ji-hoon, and then it eventually gets to a place where they're like they play off of that he's been there before, and then they're like, well, have you actually been here before? You said the game was going to be this, and the game was something different. Right. You know what I mean? And, and they're like, what do you mean you have 40 billion won? Why are you here then? And I thought that was a really fun thing to play off of. It's just, I feel like the set, that's why I think I'm so disappointed with the ending, because the setup for this season, I don't know, and you might have posted this on your letterbox, but it was like something about the way that the story was done in this season. It felt more grandiose, but it was really well paced, well detailed, and like you said, you wanted to be immersed in the world. That it literally pulls the rug out from under you at the end, like it completely does. We talked A plot, we talked B plot, C plot, which we haven't touched on yet at all.
Yes.
This sniper.
Yeah. What the hell?
What is going on with her? Do we have any theories? Do we have any? Because this character, which I don't even know the character's name, I don't even know. She doesn't have a number. Obviously, she's one of the henchmen. She's a henchwoman, and she's wears the triangle mask. Yep. And there's this kind of side thing happening with some of the henchmen where they are not entirely killing contestants. They're throwing them in their caskets, which are like these gift boxes, essentially, not killing them completely so that they can harvest their organs and sell them on the black market. Right. And she is making sure by any means necessary that is not what happens. And you also see the moment with her and I guess the second in command that they have a past, obviously. So, Sean, any theories on what this could mean and just your intrigue with this plot in general?
Well, all right. So I agree with something Mikey said earlier, which is that I think it is overall a very good thing that we're starting to see a little bit more of the guards or the henchmen in the Squid Game. And I like the detail that they are all also just like suffering people that have been hired to like do a job. But it does make me think, now we've sort of established that like, who is actually in charge then? Because we've got like 100 people who are like wearing masks and have guns and are like, but they're really in the same position as the people playing the games. And then we have the front man who's playing the games. Like, is anyone here like actually like, you know, it starts to make me ask questions about like how it's really running, which I think is the opposite of what they wanted to do. Where I think the plot was supposed to be like, we're going to answer some questions about like how it works behind the scenes. And all it made me think was like, well, if this is happening, then like, I don't really understand, you know, like why are they cool with harvesting organs? Like, wouldn't the people running the games want to like reimburse? Like, are they that rich? Who's in charge? Like, is it the front man? Then like, who's setting everything up? You know, like, do they have like a notepad of instructions to do this? Like, is there like a commander? You know, and then I just start like spiraling. So it confuses the shit out of me. In terms of the actual character, to stay on point, I don't know. Like, I don't really understand because, again, it doesn't conclude. And I don't think she's even in the last episode. I'm pretty sure she's not there.
Yeah, she might not be because the whole thing is the militia.
Right, it's
Yeah.
all this like militia fighting, and I mean, she could be dead for all I know. I have no idea. Maybe she was one of the guards that got shot. She doesn't have enough of a personality to be like, oh, like I get it. I can kind of see like where this is gonna go. Like her whole shtick seems to just be like, I'm here to do a job, and I'm gonna do my job, like no matter what. But why? Like, there's no real reason given as to why that is. Like, does she have some kind of feud with the guy that's in charge, the guy in the black suit, who I assume is like replacing the front man in the hierarchy, that she has some kind of relationship with. They plant a lot of seeds that are like, well, this could be interesting. Like, when are we going to explain that? And they never explain it. So I think that's all going to be season 3 stuff.
Season 3.
And what I was given of this character, I'm not even going to say I disliked it because it's just set up, but like I don't feel anything about it. I just kind of feel like if it wasn't there, I wouldn't be like, man, I wish there was more guard stuff. I'm just kind of like, yeah, like this could be interesting.
Yeah, the only thing we have is her relationship with the kid when she's with and we get that very little thing, but again, it probably serves a purpose where the kid asks if it hurt on her wrist that there was a suicide attempt.
Right. So
at some point
she's
with
suicidal.
her character. She
has a missing kid in North Korea. Right. That was she was like a North Korean escapee, I guess. Yeah. Like, I don't know. The show does a great job pretty much everywhere of making compelling characters. And I'm not going to say that she's not a compelling character. I just don't think they give her compelling things to do. Like, she has a great setup. Like, if you just looked at like a character sheet that broke down like who this person is, I'd be like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, what story are we going to give them?
I think we needed to see something else in that last episode with her.
Yeah.
Going into like, that's one of, out of everything that happens in the last episode, that's the one thing where I would have been happier with leaving an open strand to see where you go. Because the other thing that you see from her perspective a couple times in the last 3 episodes is you see her looking through the visor, looking at the sick child's father,
right,
multiple times. And now we know where he dies. He dies in the finale.
Okay, so I have a theory now that I'm thinking about it. So her whole arc is about the organ trading and how they're keeping people alive to harvest their organs. The person you just mentioned who gets shot and we think is dead, what if the guard only injured them to steal the organs, and then she goes in to like, she's in that room when they're about to harvest this guy's organs, and she has a chance to save him.
Where does he get shot? I forget.
I don't know. I'm going off what you said.
No, I know. I feel like he got shot in the head, so I don't know.
Well, if he was shot in the head, then that's going to be a tough,
it's a tough one to save any organs there. But I think
that has to be relevant. She has to save somebody, or she has to, because what is that organ trading plot if it's not for like someone's going to go in there and then be saved?
Well, the theory I brought up to my brother because he was asking the same thing. And maybe you're right, and I missed this about her having a missing child. I thought there was something with the organs that she might have gotten previously in the games and maybe tried to do it to help a sick child that might have been hers, and then something happened, and that's why she has a soft spot for this kid with cancer. But that's reaching, and that's based on literally just assuming.
There's just not enough given. I don't know, Mikey. What do you think?
I really don't have like anything.
Mikey's like, I barely remember this.
Right now, honestly, the only thing that I can take away from it was like I said earlier, like that. Oh, we're seeing a little bit more behind the scenes, and like that I think is cool. Everything else to that whole setup, I did not take anything away from it. It felt like strictly like set up, like you said, like, and there was nothing to take from it. I thought it was, I guess if anything, it could be cool to see her character. I don't know. I feel like there's going to be a lot of rebelling, obviously, in this third part. And so like maybe it would be cool to see her kind of like join forces with somebody else in here, whether that is our main character or someone that's participating in the games. I don't know. It would be cool, but I genuinely don't even have like a real theory as far as like.
Yeah, I don't know where they're gonna go with that.
But I mean, I trust them. I think they do a good job with their characters typically. Even if like the plot maybe isn't as interesting as the games are, which I think tends to be what's happening with the other plots. Even so, I think she'll probably have something interesting, or will say something that will support the themes of the show. And I think like the recent my recent conclusion about a lot of television and film that I've been watching is that I admire a show that says something and really swings for it and achieves at least to say something, if and gives up a little pacing over the inverse. Like I will take a show that has something to say and says it proudly and loudly over a show that is perfectly paced and excellently filmed and great cinematography and editing and all that. That's great. That's amazing for a filmmaker. But as a writer and I think as an audience member, I want a show that is really just has something to say. It has a point. I feel rewarded when I do that, and I think that she could support the themes that we've been talking about in an interesting way, and I also think she could support the main plot in a really interesting way. But I guess we'll see.
I guess we gotta wait and see. We've been talking about this show for a while. I don't know if there's much else. Is there anything else in particular that Sean, before we wrap it up, you wanted to cover, or Mikey, anything you wanted to cover before we get into scores?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I could just talk on we've been talking a lot about story and a lot about writing, and I keep harping on themes because that's like my thing. I will say though that from pretty much every other perspective, I think this is like a technical great.
Just like season one. I think
just
season one
like
was the same
season
thing.
one.
Yeah.
I think the sets are fantastic. I think the music is fun where it's supposed to be and dreadful where it's supposed to be. I don't speak Korean, but these actors seem like they're pouring their fucking heart out.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job. I think the editing is really good. There's a dolly zoom in that first game where he realizes that like he doesn't know what the games are, and it does like this when it like comes in on him, and I'm just like, that's great. And they give him like a bit of narration there for some reason. But like they're having fun. It feels fun. It feels like the people in the editing room and on the set are always enjoying themselves, and that's palpable, and I can feel that through the show. So yeah, I think just like technically it's great. The issues I have with it are in story and pretty much story alone. Which I think is, that's rare for a television show. Sometimes TV is shot really shittily or has bad acting or, whatever, any other technical problem. This, I don't feel that way at all. I think it's really, it feels high budget, and it is. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mikey, anything?
Not really anything for me. Just give us part 3. That's all.
Yeah, I want season 3.
Yeah, we're waiting on it. All right, going into scores, I'll start, and then I'll jump to you, Sean, and then we'll go to Mikey. Yeah, I really enjoyed where they were going with the season. I think the biggest thing for me is that I loved getting the exposition leading into the games. I like getting to see this bigger overall world that exists within Squid Game that isn't necessarily just the games itself, and giving us a deeper sense of character, and even getting to see more stuff with the salesman in the beginning, couple episodes. Like I loved those sequences as well. I'm intrigued to see what they do with season 3. My biggest gripe is that we end on a cliffhanger, and it literally takes me down a full point. The other thing is that I think we get a lot of new, intriguing, fun characters this season, whether it be the 2 Marines that are always saluting each other. Thanos is obviously a very flamboyant and interesting character, constantly doing drugs, whether he's playing a life or death game, I think is fun. So overall, season 2 of Squid Game, I'm going to give an 8.5 out of 10. I really think I would have been like very close to a 10 if they didn't end it the way that they did, because I just thought that they did a great job of expanding upon season 1. But that really hurt it for me. I didn't like you brought up, Sean. It didn't conclude anything for me, and now I'm just leaving with more questions, and we have to wait 6 months.
Yeah,
so
I agree, not in score, but I agree with your points. I think that calling it season 2 and saying that when we pick up it's going to be season 3 means that I have to judge the season's story as a conclusive entity. It's in this box, and am I satisfied with where it starts and ends? And my answer to that is no, because it's not done. It doesn't wrap up. That aside, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. I think it's a blast to watch. I think it's saying cool things. I think it has a heart. I think the acting is incredible. I think technically it looks great. It sounds great. I have fun watching it. As we've had this discussion, though, I have realized that a lot of time is under the context of what I just described, of this being its own season that I'm going to judge separately from season 3, has a lot of wasted time, and it has a lot of wasted potential. We have characters that go nowhere and don't conclude and don't have anything interesting to do in this season because they'll have something to do next season. And that brings it down, because that makes me think that we have an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot, and B and C, But A is great. And, the other problem with having an ending that I'm not satisfied with is that we sort of hyper focus on the problems of the season. And, while I have problems, I have a lot more like, that was great. I do feel really positively about this season. It's just that, you left me with a bitter taste. And I agree. I think that really brings it down. I believe on Letterboxd I gave this a 9 out of 10. I think I'm going to lower it down to an 8 now that we've talked about it and I've had some time to digest because I'm not satisfied with where it left off. I'm kind of off of that high that I was on, just binging it in that first day and two. But yeah, no, this is great. You should watch it. You should give this a chance. It's really exciting. I think it'll have a great ending. I have faith that like they know what they're doing. They took their time with it. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully season 3 just gets a little back on the horse, finishes some shit up that it started. But this is good, man. Yeah, this is a good show.
It is, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. I definitely still think that this was a great season. I agree with that point. For me, I think walking away from this season, again, it's the characters this season that really stood with me. And like the choices that they made, again, I think it's the humanity of it was really real. We already kind of covered the pregnant woman that was in the games, which again is already a crazy layer. They also had like this what was the theme? They brought a transgender character in, which like that alone, which is like you don't really see too many shows, especially something heavy like that. I feel like which probably could be very controversial coming from especially foreign territory. I thought that was so interesting to do, and I thought that it added like another layer. And those are just 2 characters. There's so many characters.
And you have the mother-son, which we didn't even touch on.
Yeah, it's true.
Having a mother and a son in the games together.
Son.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so for me, it was, and I appreciated that they did that because obviously like the games were so important and these characters are so important. But we know that like there's a more bearing plot that like we want to bring down these games, and so like they're just here for like side, like obviously to be here and to as substance to the rest of the games. But that I loved the most. Everything else I thought was good editing. I love the music. I love everything. A lot of the choices. The ending for me again is for sure what got me. I think I'm also gonna give it an 8.
Okay.
Yes.
We're all in the same territory.
Yeah, 8's
all
good.
Right there. 8 is a good show.
8 is a good score.
8 is a good
There's
show.
not that many 8s.
It's true.
A lot of shows are 4s.
Especially recently. It's true. But thank you guys for tuning in to our whole entire review of Squid Game Season 2. We hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Leave your comments below. We want to hear your thoughts on the season. Give this video a like if you guys can, and subscribe to us here at the Culture Wave Media Network. We're doing tons of big things here in 2025, covering a bunch of film and TV on the channel. We have our reviews of Skeleton Crew week to week that Mark and I are doing. It's award season, so we just have our reviews up this week of Baby Girl, Nosferatu, A Complete Unknown. We're going to be doing more things in the new year, so check all that stuff out. And if you guys don't follow us on social media, all of the @ and handles are below me right now in the video, as well as in the YouTube description, so be sure to check us out there as well. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Sean Villa.
And I'm Mikey Peniston.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.